That's who we love and that's who we serve. We dare all day long. And quite Sunday.
Hey, did you see my Christmas ornament on my background?
Hi, everybody. This is the Godfather. So, I tell you, my man is on. Check him out. This is the Godfather. So James Bond saying, stay with it and hit it. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, welcome to Innervision FM. Let me go back over here. Alan, tell us who our sponsors are. As
Okay. Don't forget to hit record.
I did, I got it. All
Okay.
right.
Anyway, we got a couple of sponsors that are helping us out. Christian Brothers Moving Company, based in Inglewood, Colorado, Phoenix, Arizona, and also in the great state of Texas. If you want to get moved anywhere in the nation, we've got 28 folks that are diligently prepared and willing to help with that. We got the Denver Foundation, the Colorado Arts Relief Fund, Wells Fargo Foundation, and there's one other that I want to mention as well, because we're a couple of blind people doing this kind of out of our homes. We don't really have a working studio just yet. We want to mention Littleton Eye Clinic. There's a guy by the name of Richard Damiano who is a corneal consultant, and he'll fix you right up. He'll help you. He and his office staff will certainly help you to regain your vision if it be possible to do so. So there's our sponsors. And if you want to become a sponsor, hit us up at innervisionrecords.org. That's INNERvisionrecords.org.
Oh yes, definitely. And don't forget to go to PayPal, and on PayPal you can do paypal.me/InnervisionDenver. That's paypal.me/InnervisionDenver, and support us. And you can also do a super chat as well. And don't forget to like and share this, and because it helps our algorithms. And thank you for that support yesterday. And leave your comments, because it'll take us like maybe 24 hours, maybe to get to your answers. Or sometimes it pops up in my feed, and then I can go there directly and answer any questions or anything like that as you have throughout the show. Well, today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have something very, very, very interesting and very, very positive that's happening. That has happened in the blind community, but sometimes it gets lost in or maybe the paperwork or the history books, or depending on who's writing the history books and so forth. But somehow, somewhere, it gets documented, and then we have people like who we have on the show today, the blind history lady, to bring it to the forefront, and then hey, we can acknowledge that person existed. So I'd like to welcome to the show the blind history lady.
Thank you
Welcome.
very much. Yeah, it all depends on who is writing our history as to what is told and how it's told.
Ah, yes. Now, I guess you guys were looking through the archives for information, but it probably wasn't what you were looking for, but you came across it. How did that happen?
Most of my good stories don't come because I was looking for them. They come because of an accident. And that was the situation here. In Colorado, when I first moved here over 4 years ago, I found that there was a collection of old minutes and maybe some newspaper clippings that were available that dated back to about 1915. Well, I can't read them, so I needed to have them transcribed, and the best way to do that, I found, was to start a project that would be a opportunity for us to preserve the documents themselves, and then as a result, I could find ways to get them transcribed into an accessible format. Because as you probably know, just scanning something and putting it into a PDF, even though a lot of our software that we have on our speech programs and stuff can translate PDFs, it can't translate the old fonts that we had from the 20s, 30s, 40s. And then when you get old records, especially if they were written in the 30s and 40s, they were written on paper that was very cheap because we were dealing with the Depression, the Second World War. And so ink bleeds and you get lots of dots and squares and unrecognizable figures and such when you're scanning them. So, and being a genealogist and having a lot of experience with that, I knew that these records just were not going to deal well. And besides, some of them were actually crumbling in our hands when we were working with them because they're that old. Some of them had mold and mildew, the ones that we could salvage and work with. You don't want to handle those too long. And a bunch of them had been water damaged. So there was a lot of stuff lost. But when we had them scanned and into PDFs, and then we recruited well over 100 volunteers to take those PDFs and translate them into a text or Word document. That was very helpful. So then once they were translated by the volunteers, some of us would go back through them, make sure that they were accurate, that the volunteer wasn't just, making all kinds of mistakes. And one of the things I ran across in 1917 and 1918 minutes was a desire to pass legislation that would provide some kind of assistance for the adult blind in the state of Colorado. There was a workshop for the blind that had opened in 1912 that could help about 20 people. But that was it. And, you had to live in Denver, and many of them lived at that workshop. So this wasn't an option for the 60-some-year-old people who had lost their vision. They wanted to take the welfare system, the welfare opportunities, that there wasn't really a system, and make them consistent throughout the state, so that if you lived in Weld County, you would get the same amount of assistance as if you lived in Arapahoe County, or in some cases it was community to community. If you lived right on the border of one town or another, a blind person might get $2 a month from the local charity that was providing assistance, while the person across the street could get $8. So they wanted to bring some consistency into that. They wanted to bring the teaching program that had started in 1913 under one roof, that everything would be coordinated, that there would have opportunities to have more than one home teacher for the entire state of Colorado.
Whoa.
Just one lady.
That was in between the horse and buggy and the car. Oh, wow.
If she had a horse and buggy, sometimes she thought she was pretty great. Jenny Coward Jackson helped to get that law passed to have a home teacher for the blind in about 1913, and was the only applicant for the job. So they had to hire her. And she was a blind lady that came from Missouri, and she took it upon herself to travel all over the state, and she would stay in a place for 1, 2, 3 weeks, teach classes, move on to the next community, then come back 6, 8 months later. And she spent most of her salary on getting it wasn't an income opportunity for her. She would spend her salary on providing slates and styluses, braille paper, canes, whatever the person needed. She would start them sometimes by buying their original stock so that they could learn to do rug weaving, things like that.
So they were really like spreading her really thin. I mean,
She must have had a lot of energy, this lady.
I would say so because I mean now like when you go to school, I guess it costs like you have to get at least $50 of supplies. You got to have boxes of napkins, the pencils, the erasers, and all that stuff, and that's on the parent. I'm thinking like, where's all this money going towards that we're putting in the schools? How come that's just not something that just should be supplied? So even today they're doing this almost the same kind of model. It seems like.
Well, you got to pay for the administration.
Oh man, I think we need to fire the administration. I mean,
Another show.
Yeah, but okay, go ahead.
But anyway, so because Jenny Coward Jackson had gone around the state, they had a lot of documentation of the varied opportunities or lack thereof, mostly, for blind adults in Colorado, and put that all together. And there were two people that caught my interest in doing this. And one in the minutes was A.M. Ammons, and the another one was Mr. Downing. And, have to find out who they are. Ammons is a popular name around here for many things. So I knew that he had to be connected to a family that had some sort of historical connection to Colorado. So as a genealogist, I took those skills and started looking for A.M. Ammons and found out that it was Elias M. Ammons, who was the former governor of the state of Colorado, which brought up another question. Was he blind when he was governor? So that means you got to start digging around and finding out all kinds of things, looking for all kinds of other resources. And it took almost 3 years, but
wow.
Elias M. Ammons was blinded at a young age in high school, or he had an illness that caused him to go blind. He gained some of the sight back. He wanted to be a newspaper man, and he was for a while, but then he got to the point where he could no longer read. So he left the newspaper business and went into business cattle ranching. In 1890, he was elected to the House of Representatives, served for 2 terms. He was then elected to the state Senate. And back in the state Senate, there's no mention of him being blind, because at that time, if you were blind, you had no vision. There wasn't that legal blindness thing. That didn't come to play till the 1930s. So, but they acted upon the fact that he could not read by giving him, when he was elected Speaker of the Senate, they gave him a reader, an assistant, which was something that had never been done before. And there was no mention that we're doing this because Ammons cannot read or whatever. He just needs this extra assistance. That was it. Nothing said. When he was running for governor, you couldn't hardly find anything about the fact that he could not see. There was a couple of news stories that were done in the early 1900s that highlighted how his wife and his daughter read for him and helped him keep up with his correspondence and so on.
But do you think that was like normal for the time? Because I mean, we had a president that was using crutches and one in a wheelchair and all that kind of stuff, that they try to take pictures from the
the waist up
and stuff like
when
that.
When he didn't have crutches with him or had the push aside. Yes.
Yeah. So maybe that was like just the norm, that they sort of like try to cover stuff like up and stuff like that up. Now, even today, I mean.
Yeah, you can go back and forth on that, and I'll tell you why. If you were a person in power, if you were a person who was the leader of a company, and had been brought to the public attention as that person in power, you did not find the mention of your blindness. However, there was a tobacco salesman here in Colorado. He was blinded when he was in a political parade, and the other side were throwing stones, and he got hit in the head.
Wow.
But it probably saved his life, actually, in the sense that he was a bit of a wild child and had actually been suspected of 5 murders and was tried for murder in another state, but they couldn't come to a decision. So,
Yeah.
anyway,
Okay.
So this guy, as a blind man, he was struggling to find what he was going to do. No training. We're talking the 1880s. No training. So he started working with a friend in a cigar store. The friend, after about a year, just gave up the business and he bought him out. He started traveling as a tobacco salesman. Pretty soon he added and he started buying tobacco and making his own cigars, making his own blend. When he passed away down in Pueblo in the 1930s, the man was he was fairly well-to-do. He took his wife on European trip and all that sort of thing. Married long after he was blind. Now, they referred to him as blind or mentioned it many times because that's how he was known, as the amazing blind guy who could travel all around the state on the train by himself. And he grew up into his business, where it seems that Ammons, because he was just Elias M. Ammons, he didn't come from a wealthy family, but everything he touched just seemed to turn to gold. He had a way of he had a confidence of himself, a way of speaking, that people just followed him, and they talked about Elias Ammons. They didn't talk about the blind rancher. They didn't talk about the blind historian. They didn't talk about the blind legislator. They talked about him as Elias M. Ammons. And when I'm researching people, if you go into the newspapers, it's a very minority thing, as you know. If you were trying to research Black people, American Indians, the Native Americans, and so on, they would refer to them as Blind Jim,
Yes.
Blind Mary.
I remember you said that in the last interview.
And just as they did with the minorities, you didn't get a last name. So it is hard to track them down and find out who they were, because as a minority, many newspapers in the articles did not even give us a last name. So it shows the type of minority status that we had for centuries around the world, around the country. But Elias M. Ammons was just kind of fun to find in these documents, because he was the vice president, or at least on the board of directors, from about 1916 till his death in 1925. And he taught others how to work the legislature. He taught others how to write legislation. He taught them how to lobby. As he was going on with all of his other things, he was part of the Colorado Historical Society. He wrote for the Journal. In fact, the day before he died, he finished his last article for the Journal. He was very ill the last several months of his life and bedridden, but he still kept working from his bed.
Just like the Queen.
Yeah. You got to have that kind of spirit. I think we have to, as blind people, many times make a choice. Are we going to step over the line and take a chance and scare ourselves silly? Or are we going to stay safe on the other side of the line and not reach a goal that we don't even know we could reach yet?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about now that, when this is being recorded, it's like 20 or more days before the November 8th voting. I noticed that they have a blue book that comes out, and they also have like a gray book. And, we're not taught anything about this. And I noticed, like, in one of the books, they'll tell you that this is going to go against the Tabor here. But then when the final book comes out, they won't mention that because it's written by government people that want more taxes from you. So they'll leave out those little nuances when the final book comes. And if you don't know to get this either in your email or get on the mailing list as a regular citizen, and my sister would say, there's nothing we can do. Well, yes, there is something to do, because if you know the rules and the ins and outs of taking a test, you do better on the test.
Yes.
But as a society, it's almost like they write them in such a confusing form, and we just say, do your civic center. But we got to do more than our civic center. We have to know how to question some of the things that these politicians who want just bigger and bigger government, we need to know how to circumvent that and say, hey, wait a minute, does that help we the people? Or is that just helping you, the politician? Which I think
That's a really valid point, Johnny, because the idea being, when amendments come up and you've got vote yes on or vote no on, sometimes what they'll do is they'll write an amendment in such a way as to, if you vote yes, you're really voting no, but if you vote no, you're really voting yes on a given topic. And so, having the information in a easy to use format that's not super confusing, might be something that we could wish for.
Well, no, it's out there. This Kim Munson spent 200 hours working on the voter guides.
Right.
So if you go to KimMunson.com, she has a voter guide, and then she's coming up in the next couple of days with a 1-page. So it's a very detailed, with audio, her doing it in audio as well on her website. Now, this is like, something that's here now, but, back when we were younger,
Oh, yeah.
we would have to grab somebody who cited and hope that they didn't pass out of being tired of reading all this stuff for us.
And the Blue Book is available through the Library for the Blind of Colorado.
Right.
In an electronic format that you can access and go through that book.
Yes. But then
But
also,
you're right.
yeah.
I mean, yes, you're right. You have to be sure that if you're voting yes, you're voting for it, or if you're voting against it. Yes,
Yeah.
that's always got to really read that stuff. And that's why I think it's important, especially for us as blind people. We knew this back in the 20s, that the 1920s, 100 years ago, that we had to be active in the community to understand the legislation. And we have to do that today. And I've gone to some things with the League of Women Voters, ask questions. Well, so what does this proposition really mean? What does this amendment really mean? If I vote yes, how does this affect this part of that process? And it is confusing. You have to be out there and active.
You know what I would push for if I'm blessed enough to get there is simplification, 2 pages. If you can't write it in 2 pages, throw it out. And I know that's going to be a hard push.
The lawyers would not like you.
Oh yeah, I know. I mean, I'm not going to be the one that they're going to say, oh, crabby Johnny. No. But sometimes it's like, let's not confuse we the people, because we hire you. You didn't hire us. And so I think these politicians, they've gotten away with so much so long, and we've been asleep. Mike Johnson there just wrote a song about, someone who's highly aware, but his followers being kind of asleep, saying, "Oh, we're so tired," and he said, "Hey, let's just stay up just 1 hour, and let's study this."
But the only way to make changes is we as disabled people get out there and run for office, because there has not been a blind person that I know of. I never say there has never been, because I prove myself wrong and others prove me wrong too. But in Colorado, to the best of my knowledge, since 1959, there has not been a blind person elected to any state position in the state of Colorado. However, since 1890, there had been at least one in every decade. So what's going on?
There's
Yeah.
a gentleman by the name of Homer Page who was running for some office, if I remember correctly, somewhere in Boulder, was it?
Boulder. Yeah, he was running for geez, I think Congress that he didn't make. He was elected to Boulder City,
Right.
Colorado. And we have had blind people who have been elected as mayors or council members or things like that. But we need to have a representation in state government, and it's just not there.
Okay. So I'm running for House District 5 here in Denver. So, we'll see how that come out. And we had a very favorable news article written about me in the North Star, the Denver North Star, which I was amazed that he was that fair in presenting like all three of us what we stood for and all that stuff. So it was interesting that this guy Eric has what I would consider to be a fair and balanced newspaper. Uh, and so I just want to put a shout out to the North Star newspaper because I really like that the story that just came out on the 15th of October. It was fair, and he really pointed out in very clear terms what I stood for with the other guy that I'm opposing and the Unitarian person. So yeah, it's and the young people, I don't know because you're trying to when you're getting out of high school as a young blind person, it's so many things on the plate for you to hurdles that you have to jump over, and it's like, oh man, it's like, but you don't realize until you decide you want to go buy a home, and you say, why is it homes out of my reach? Because voters didn't vote for this, or they voted for this, and it made it more and more and more, and it's like you could really, if you just engage, and I thank goodness there's the federation down there who is like a attack dog, they're like a pit bull, and we need more like that. And I encourage, like, if you know any blind kids, any blind young people, older blind people, engage and ask them, are you engaged like politically? Because the answer may be no, the answer may be yes, and the answer may be, oh, I never really thought about that. So it's like, but to find out that we had a blind governor, and thank you, Blind History Later, for like bringing this to the forefront and give people a way to get a hold of you. And then I want to talk a little bit more about this guy.
Okay. So I write a monthly email to my subscribers. And if you shoot me an email at theblindhistorylady@gmail.com, that's all one word, theblindhistorylady@gmail.com, I will add you to my list, and you will be able to receive all of my emails that are coming up. And also, I am published on Smashwords. So I'm self-published there. If you go to smashwords.com and look for Peggy Chong or The Blind History Lady, my books that I have published up there will show up. I have written about a man from South Carolina who was not allowed to attend the college he wanted to become a teacher until people pressured the college to let him in. He graduated the top of his class, and it took 50 years for anybody to meet his record in school. Then he wasn't allowed to teach. But here's a guy who then ran for public office and became the head of the Department of Education in South Carolina. So he couldn't teach in schools, but he could run them.
Yes, if you can't skin it one way, you can go through the other doors that are open. Yeah,
That's right. That's exactly right. You always need to look at, you can't always just stick on the same path. You have to look at where the other options are coming from and take advantage of them.
yeah, and that's the resilience of we who are visually impaired and blind. It's like it doesn't happen with others, but it does happen where sometimes when it's kind of interesting. I had this homeless guy walk up to me and say, do you have $1? But then my wife had just told me that at Target they were paying $18 an hour. I said, you only want $1. I can show you where you can get $18. He said,
Yeah.
his eyes got really big. He's like where? And then down there at Target on 16th in California. Go down there and apply. And it's like, usually those are not the answers that they want.
No.
But my wife,
You
she
know,
always says, "Why do you engage with people like that?" I said, "Because if they're gonna walk up to me, a blind person, and ask me for $1, I'm gonna try to, wiggle their mind a little bit." But
here's an interesting exercise. If you were to go and just ask Google or Siri or any of these things that we might use for search engines, how many blind people exist within the world, and then break it down to how many exist in the United States, how many are of work age between 16 to 65, this kind of thing, you're going to get all kinds of different statistical figures. And from one day to the next, they'll be different. One thing that isn't different is the idea that there is more than a 50% unemployment rate in the blind community. Sometimes it hovers around 60%. Other times it goes up above 70%. And even some people believe that the real world figure is somewhere around 90% unemployment in the United States of America. Before we get back to Elias Ammons, what are your thoughts on that?
You're right. It depends on who's collecting the statistics and how. Some include in their employment statistics people in sheltered shops, and that changes from decade to decade as to how that's counted. And of course, this sheltered shop is a very different program today than it was even 20 years ago.
Oh, yes.
And are they talking about minimum wage? Are they talking about for example, some of those statistics that claim there's a very low unemployment rate also include unpaid homemakers and so on,
Absolutely.
because they show up in rehabilitation statistics as a closed case.
Yes.
So how are they gathering the data? And that's when I look at a lot of the things that I'm looking at in research, I want to know how they gathered that data first, so that I can understand exactly what they're measuring. Because, for example, if you look at the 1910 census and you read the breakdown of the 1910 census, they had a specific "were you blind" question
Yes.
on there. Now, that relies on self-identification. And some not so self-identified, because those workers did get paid a little bit more if they found more blind people. And that was partly because people did not identify as a disabled person at that point in time. And they were trying to find out, this was when we were starting to see a push for services across the country. Is there really a need? And so they found that there were 60% of the blind people who were self-supporting, meaning that they were not receiving money from a charity. They were not receiving money from family. They were not receiving money from any government entity. Now, those people were living in conditions today that would be considered totally unacceptable. They might be, especially farm laborers, and there were a lot of farm laborers in that blind group. Farm laborers back then, they might all live in a barn, the sighted and the blind ones. They didn't have a home, didn't have a lot of possessions, but they were considered self-supporting because they were farm laborers. They had a place to live. They had their own money. They weren't relying on anybody else. So you have to look at how all of those statistics are put together and what their measurements were.
I might have to send you over to Polis, because he said he's a data-driven person, And I'm thinking like we're number one in car death, so car theft. So that data is not working for that. Number two in fentanyl death, so that data is not working for that. Number one in bank robberies, data is not working for that. And what else are we number one, number two, or number three in?
We're
Well,
just still the Wild West.
oh yeah, and then we're 15%, no, 15 to 16% inflation rate in Colorado. So we're like eight above like the 8.7% or 8% nationally. So you got to watch where those like you said, who's doing the data, and sometimes you got to go deeper than just saying, oh, I'm a data driven person, because sometimes you got to maybe go out and talk to the people who put you in office, or who that you had this job for. And you said like in some cases they paid them the more to find those kind of people. Do you think that motivated them more to find people, or they just wanted to, did they fudge it a little bit?
I am guessing that there might have been a bit of fudging, but by and large, I think that it probably brought out the fact that Grandpa, who could see some, they would categorize him as a blind person as we would today. I think that we did find more people who would be considered blind today than they thought of as blind at that time. And when you look at like the enrollment for the First World War, and finding some of these people who they had one eye and not that great in the other, but if they wanted to serve in the military, some of the guys fudged it a little bit and got in. And but it was a good way to document and then go back and fact check the 1910 census that these, especially men, really did have. And you see it in the 1900 census, they're not listed as having a disability at all.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're in the overtime portion. Of so do you have any other nuggets that you want to share with us with regard to Elias M. Ammons?
Yeah, how do we button this up? Yes.
Okay, well, you can go and read a lot about Elias M. Ammons on the internet. There is a lot about him, not so much about the fact that he can't see very well or anything like that. It talks in a few of the notes that he has limited vision, or that his vision was poor. Now, when he passed away, there was this huge funeral for him. He had 100 pallbearers. That's just the pallbearers. That's not the people. In fact, not everybody could get into the church. The interesting thing, again, we were talking about newspapers and how it's presented. The interesting thing to me was they talked about all of the organizations that he had helped, that he had worked with, that he had helped to found. He was a founder of Cattle Congress, another thing still going on today.
Yes.
They talked about his legislative activities and so on, but not a single mention of the fact that he had been a board member of the United Workers for the Blind. Not a single mention about how he had led the legislation for 1918 that was passed that provided for a unification of a welfare system, more teaching opportunities for adult blind. None of that was put into the obituaries about Ammons at all. This is a man whose son went on to be governor. We sometimes hear about how blind parents don't always make the best role models for your children. But here, Elias Ammons, his son was governor. If you look at the Ammons lineage, you'll find that they are doctors and educators, and he left a really sound foundation for his family.
That's what you call a legacy right there.
Absolutely.
Oh, definitely. Well, the Blind History Lady. I mean, thank you for like some gold nuggets that you've given us today. And once again, give people a way to get a hold of you again.
You can reach out to me through email at theblindhistorylady@gmail.com. And I am published on Smashwords, and that's all one word. Just smash the word together, Smashwords. And you just search for Peggy Chong or the Blind History Lady, and my many books will come up there as well.
Okay.
One of
And,
the big why
go ahead.
we are doing this show is this is what is termed by the National Federation of the Blind as Meet the Blind Month. And so, oftentimes we will go ahead and feature some blindness related topics on this particular podcast. But this is a kind of special time for us. We've got White Cane Day in this month, which has passed already, and a number of different.
The ADA
Yep,
was passed in October.
absolutely. So
Okay.
we've got quite a few things that kind of made this a Meet the Blind Month kind of month.
Yeah, yes, thank you. And oh, by the way, if you see the red shirt I have on, the Intervision shirt, if you want to get one of these, just go to paypal.me/Intervision Denver, and any donations for 35 above in the United States, we'll send it to you. No posters and whatever. But if you're outside of the country, because I know it costs $40 something to send stuff out there. I'm saying like $100, and then that'll cover the cost of shipping and all that kind of stuff. But so hey, that's it for today. We'll see you the next week. Everybody have a fantastic weekend. Find something fun to do the weekend. Get out before the weather gets really cold. I know it just really snowed and I forgot what state it was, but it just really got dumped with snow. But even if it's snow, throw some snowbars, make a snowman or a snowwoman or transgender snowman, or I don't know, whatever.
We have a
Have fun.
volcano getting ready to go off here.
A volcano in the Philippines?
Yeah, it's getting ready to go up.
Wow.
Well,
Every 4 or 5 years it goes off. We're right
Hey,
at the base of it.
really quick, we want to recognize Mike Johnson. Hey Joe is his
handle.
moniker,
Yeah.
and he's got some published songs out there. We try to help out grassroots musicians, whether they be financially challenged or physically disabled or both.
Yeah,
So
Sunset
there-
Highway was his first album, and then Chasing Dreams was another one. And so if Mike Johnson, because there's a lot of Mike Johnsons out there, so you look for those two, and then you can find other songs as well. So
Where
anyway,
do they find stuff, Mike?
Thanks.
Where do they find your stuff?
everywhere.
I have a lot of stuff on SoundCloud. It's MJ5410 on SoundCloud.
Cool.
On YouTube, it's MJ5410 and MJ54101 YouTube channels.
Okay.
Don't
All
forget
right.
to Amazon.com and do all your Christmas shopping through Amazon Smile. That will help
Yeah.
us out greatly.
Yeah, pick
And,
out Intervision. Yeah.
Yep.
Go to our website. It's a direct link, InnervisionFM.com or InnervisionFM.com. Just go to that website for that. All right, let's close it out. Thank you very much, Blind History Lady, and we'll see
Thank
everybody
you.
next week.